So Darryl, you've just completed your first year as CEO. What have been your biggest surprises and challenges?
I would say the biggest surprise is in the consistency of the culture. What I did early on is I went around in town halls and big meetings and small meetings all around the organization, and I asked the question, how could we unify better as one bank and simplify ourselves and accelerate our performance? We ended up having very, very consistent responses everywhere across the bank. And the reason I say that's a bit surprising is you might think with 50,000 people dispersed all the way around the world that you would get very different themes and very different responses everywhere you go, and you don't. You get an incredible level of consistency throughout the place, which to me is really exciting.
Challenges. What have been your biggest challenges over the last year as you took over this role?
I'd say the greatest challenge is to take what I've just talked about in terms of that consistency of engagement and pivot everybody towards protecting our values-based culture and at the same time leaning into a competitive culture where the objective is to serve the client always better than the competitor and to increase our market share along the way.
Can you talk to us about what you feel are the most important risks to banks in the Canadian marketplace, but also to BMO in particular?
Yeah, and I think that the answer there should be similar whether it's this bank or others, because you're always facing off against many risks in our industry, whether they be operational risks, credit risk, market risk, brand risk, reputational risk. The one that has to come close to or at the top of the list is in fact the cyber risk. So we spend a lot of time thinking about cyber risk, and we're working very hard right now. And the reason it's important is because underlying that risk, the most important thing that we're trying to do is protect the customer. Whether we're protecting capital from fraud, whether we're protecting their identity, whether we're protecting their information, that's what we're trying to do. So that would be a threat where I would say, relative to all of the other risks, the global threat is increasing at a rate that is more significant than the others, and therefore the response and the infrastructure that you put in front of that threat also has to have an investment and increase the ability to defend against.
What are some of the critical factors in managing cyber risk?
Well, one of the things we thought quite deeply about starting about 6 or 8 months ago is whether structurally we're organized in a way that maps against the threat. Let's go back 10 years, for example. If you think about the distinction between fraud and cyber and physical security, it was probably a reasonable response to have a financial services organization to say, well, the fraud team's over here, and the physical security team's over here, and the cyber team is over here, because you were responding to each of those threats in a little bit of an idiosyncratic way. To me, cyber meets fraud, meets physical security. What we've done in response to that is we put all of those functions under one roof. We call it our financial crimes unit. We've appointed world-class leadership to run that unit, and all of this with the view to saying this is real-time response. What we're creating right now is, we think, a best-in-class capability for our customers because of the confluence of these risks in one central organization.
In your view, how much of BMO's innovation is based on the needs of the customer?
All of it. And I say that because we've always said that we're a customer-led bank. The customer's needs are evolving, and we're in the business of trying to stay ahead of that and meet them where they want to be met. And in order to do that, you have to change some of the ways that you do business internally. When we look at our digital agenda, we are increasing our spend, we're increasing our investment, we're increasing our hiring practices and our workplace so that we can continue to get ahead of where the customer wants to be.
In terms of evolving needs and digital acceleration, can you talk to us a little bit about your views on open banking?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, I will say I think open banking is exciting, and we're traveling in that direction. And I think the conversations that we're having in Canada about open banking are very productive. But I think as you look forward, there's some key principles that have to be in place in order for open banking to be successful. The first one's security. And if you don't have security and the confidence that the customer understands that security is there, nothing else will work. Another one is transparency. When we talk to customers about open banking, they really want to understand, if I am to provide my data and my information, what am I getting in return for that? I think this is the hardest part of solving for open banking. Understanding what I expect to get back and delivering what you expect to get back in the transparency file is critical. And then the last one is control. If the customer doesn't have control over that transparency conversation in terms of making the decision. You get to see this, you don't get to see that, as opposed to having a blanket charter where everything is available to everybody all the time. The fear that I would submit is the customer will lose control and the system won't work. If we can figure out how to solve for security, transparency, and control, we can have an open banking system in this country that could work very well, in my view.